Recording in progress.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Welcome
How are
to
you?
this Ozaru Day. Fine, and you, Aditya?
Doing well. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
To all the people that are listening to us today, let me introduce you to Aditya Varna Iyer. He is the CEO and co-founder of Allos, one quantum computing foundational science expert, and he's been working on a really interesting concept on how to apply science into health. Aditya is a postdoc researcher in Oxford, and he has been working for the last couple of years researching in Europe, between Switzerland and also Canada. Welcome, Aditya.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And let's get to it. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the future of health. Health is that part that there is so many news out there, like we're supposed to be finding the magic key to live forever. There's a lot of papers like we can expand life, we can even manufacture organs, right? There's a lot of things that are trendy, not necessarily real right now, but science has this magical way of trial and error that eventually a hypothesis, if it's proven right, it's gonna get to the result. So I'm very curious about your background, Aditya, because you're a physicist and you're a PhD in physics. How did you end up doing things in health?
That's a very interesting question. So I have a background in physics, as you said, and physics is the science of the most fundamental things in the universe. The way we emerged, the way we live, the way we communicate, all of it is underpinned by some of the laws of physics, if not all the laws of physics. I was really curious about this subject, and I pursued my PhD in this, and I realized that there are a lot of macroscopic concepts, like the emergence of life, the emergence of consciousness, the way we deliver healthcare, which follow the same laws of physics, but at a very coarse-grained level, they seem to obey different dynamics. So I got very curious about this and tried to apply my knowledge and understanding of the field to healthcare, and quickly got sucked into this world.
That's incredible. How close are them? Is it like the same rules of physics that you normally work on daily basis? You now go and think on health. Let's think on, for example, aging. You say, okay, it's also something that has an equation that you're getting older at certain rate, and there are X, Y, or Z factors that get you older. How does that work?
I mean, science has become very interdisciplinary recently. Like scientific progress is mostly made by collaborating in a variety of fields, of which physics is usually one. I wouldn't say that there's an exact parallel between the way we do physics and the way we do healthcare or life sciences, but the scientific method remains the same. We come up with hypotheses, we do experiments to validate the hypotheses, maybe tweak the hypothesis a little bit along the way. So that part of science is largely unchanged across disciplines. But the problems that you solve are very different. A physicist would be interested in more fundamental laws that govern nature itself, whereas someone in life sciences would be more interested in the mechanism of action of diseases, or how cells work, more emergent concepts that appear but are still underpinned by the laws of physics.
And let's talk about other sciences. How about computer science?
Well, computer science is an exciting field. It's sort of the intersection of mathematics and physics, the way I see it. Around the 1940s, 1947, I think we got the transistor from Bardeen, who was a physicist, who discovered it in one of his routine laboratory experiments. And fast forward now, you have microprocessors, you have NVIDIA coming up with GPUs. That's like 60, 70 years of physics right there. That's become the tools that we use today. And I think all scientific innovation, or technological innovation rather, comes from some deep scientific principle that we discover. And future generations benefit from the science that we have today. But the rate at which scientific innovation is proceeding is fantastic. Like we're in a golden era where we're seeing a lot of the latest science being translated into technology at a very rapid pace. And that's the part that I'm most excited about.
And let's move towards your your project, your idea. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about Allos. What is Allos?
So Allos means the alternative explanation. We set up this company about 3 years ago during the height of the COVID pandemic, where we were developing some prognosis and triaging tools. This was pre-vaccine era, where you didn't really have a vaccine. The problems that hospitals are facing at that time were how many people need to be in the hospital, how many beds do we keep vacant, who requires how much oxygen. And we built an AI platform that helped forecast these demands. Fortunately, the vaccine came shortly after, and we moved to other disease areas like chronic autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic lupus, to name a few. So we're in that space right now where we're developing prognosis tools using AI for healthcare systems in the chronic conditions. And we're also helping the pharmaceutical industry de-risk clinical trials. There are a number of fascinating drugs that are being discovered each day, but very few of them make it past clinical trials because of the complexity going from the lab to preclinical work to animals to real-world patients. Allos exists to streamline the process of going from preclinical work to clinical trials using real-world patient data so that you can see more drugs being developed cost-effectively and brought to the market.
So if I get this right, what you are doing is analyzing information with a scientific approach to predict something. Is it
Yes. Yes, we're largely predicting clinical outcomes. So say, Guillermo, you want to join a clinical trial, or I want to join a clinical trial to test the latest cancer therapy. How does the pharmaceutical company or the researcher developing the therapeutic know that they should pick you or me, or pick both of us to be patients of the trial? How do they know how many of you or me should they pick? Is it 300 patients? Is it 500 patients? Is it 700? These are very important because the choice you make determines what goes on the label of the drug. It determines whether the clinical trial is going to be successful. It determines whether the patients are going to be safe when the clinical trial happens. So we use an AI-enabled approach to look at real-world health records to answer these questions. Should I recruit you? Should I recruit someone else? How many of you should I recruit? Will it be safe? These are not answers that come easily. And we spend billions of dollars on clinical trials each year. And we spend trillions on drugs, prescribing them to healthcare systems. And there must be an efficient way, given that we're now in the era of precision medicine, to make all of this cheaper and streamlined for our individual needs.
So if I get this right, in my field, for example, we see a lot of analysis around tickets, what you bought, when you bought it, where do you live. So there's a way of connecting using statistics on how often or which factors correlate the most, right? Which ones connect the dots. In health, is it the same? Is it like, okay, your weight, your genes, but how deep do you need to go? You need to go as deep as DNA?
Oh, yes. I think the deeper you go, the more insights you uncover. But we can't go deep into everything because there's only so much data that has been collected. The quantity of data that's being generated in healthcare is phenomenal. Like we get all sorts of data that's being generated on a daily basis. And we can go as deep as genes, and we can go higher, maybe at the level of proteomics. We can do functional genomics, and then we can even do clinical data, like your blood pressure, your hemoglobin, your white blood cell count. And these are variables that all need to be tied together at various stages for me to tell you whether you will respond to a drug, whether that drug is the best for you. If I give you that drug, are you going to have another disease? Because drugs are becoming more and more complex. You can go as deep as you want, but the availability of data is a huge problem that we're now trying to solve in healthcare by bridging all these things together.
Wow, that seems like a lot of analysis running at the same time, trying to understand which is the best like branch. Am I right? Like it's like a tree. Like there's a lot of analysis that can be done, and you try to figure out which branch of the tree gets you to a more consistent result, at least at simulation stage, right? This is like simulating before you got the trials, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot of analysis, a lot of statistics that goes on, and nobody can tell you deterministically whether you will be the right patient for a clinical trial or not. We can only tell you probabilistically that maybe 80% of the time the drug will be good on you, and then we need to take a shot based on that to decide whether we want to recruit you to a clinical trial or not. And when you go to the level of the clinic, when a physician is prescribing a drug to you, they don't take a genetic test or a biopsy or, like very complex assays to prognose your condition. They may do it based on blood pressure. They may do it based on some diagnostic tests. So at that stage, you can't expect all of this data to be there in a hospital. You need to work with the data that you have available to make equally strong, if not better, predictions in the clinic where it matters a lot. So at each level, you need to decide how much data you want, what the level of complexity of the problem is, and what question you're trying to solve. And that's the next frontier in healthcare, the way I see it.
Let's talk a little bit more on that, on the next frontier, because there are a lot of things that are interesting, at least on imagining them. There's a lot of people thinking on how fast can we get to, let's say, 200-year-old human being. Like there's these stages, and obviously we will always try to get older on a, let's say, more healthier way, because it's not only how old you are, but also how strong, how you are able to. You can see a lot of innovation going around quality of life, solving chronic diseases, or just figuring out a best way to help people understand what to eat. Like there's even at food, there's not the same reaction on each people, each person on the same food. What are your thoughts on the future? What are you excited about?
Oh, I'm excited about all these things that you just mentioned. Let's start from food, because that's like the simplest thing we have control over, right? If food does not stop and end with us, we have countless of microbiomes in our body, like in the brain, in the gut, and in the last 20 years, we've seen some phenomenal research to tell us like how this could be correlated with cancer, how this could be correlated with neurodegenerative diseases. And these bacteria feed on the byproducts of the food that we consume. So it's very important to understand like what good diet means for every single human being. And this can change depending on your demographic. What can be a good diet for you, Guillermo, may not necessarily be the best diet for me. And vice versa, what's the best diet for me may not be good for you or for our bacteria as well. And we've noticed several things about the microbiome. For example, if you live with someone long enough, like your wife, you end up sharing a microbiome. You end up changing the composition of that. So that's another thing that we'd like to understand. And then medicine, like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the disease like rheumatoid arthritis would put you in a very crippling position. You could die from the disease. You would be unable to walk. You would not even be able to move your hands. But then you had advanced therapies like monoclonal antibodies that came about, and now patients can walk. They can even play sports. And there's no risk of mortality. So therapies have advanced a lot, and they're expensive at this stage. Is there a way we can make those therapies cheaper? That I think is the next frontier. There's personalized medicine, there's stratified medicine, there's precision medicine. And these three things are very different. Before we can even begin to give every human being their own medicine, we need to know what personalized medicine looks for you. Do we give you a tablet? Do we give you a liquid to swallow? Do we give you an injection? Do we give you a patch on the skin? I think these are all frontiers that have emerged in healthcare that we are now in a position to answer. It's a very exciting space to be in right now.
And just following your train of thought, something that I find amazing is that we are at this, how to say, tipping point in terms of education. Like if I take a look at my children's classrooms, I think there's space or enough room right now, even to reimagine the concept of on what we're teaching to our children. Right. For example, you just mentioned three things that I have no idea why we're not studying them. Like how to eat better. Just what you describe needs data. It's not as I like banana and you like apple. No, it's you need some data points to understand your biome, to understand how it reacts to each food. And not everything must be trial and error, right? There's a lot of diagnoses that you can take to have the actual data points, instead of seeing if you're allergic to peanuts and worth risk it, right? How is that testing and predicting stage moving forward? Is there any way that we can teach it so easily that someone can understand why is food good for me, but maybe not for my wife, or maybe not for my kids, even though we share blood, we share DNA.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think we're at the perfect point to answer that right now. With the advances in AI, we can take in so much data that's individualized for every single patient. Maybe I tell you to give me your diet for 5 years, and I track your wife's diet for 5 years, and I track your genetic conditions. And I can come up with some predictive model that can tell me that this is the best possible diet for you. And you don't need to know all the data that went into that. You only need to know what the most defining factors are that led to this conclusion. And we now have models that can prioritize those variables that are important in determining what's a good diet for you. And those variables may be different for your wife. So we're now in a position to extract all of that information from the data that exists, that patients report by themselves, that you collect in the clinic, that you give up for voluntary samples during clinical trials, or do your own genetic testing. We can put all of that together on maybe a few thousand, 100,000 people, and come up with insights for the rest of the population. So we're there already, but who's going to collect this data? And if this solution exists, who's going to pay for it? I think the healthcare systems now need to innovate to accommodate the fact that this is now possible. But how are we going to change our financial system so that we can accommodate all of this innovation? That's a separate story, which I think is maybe a whole podcast in itself.
No, of course, and not only finance. Also, there's laws, right? Like, who owns this information? How can they use it? Can I share it? Like there's a lot of things that I think the world needs to understand before acting, but we don't share them. So how is the world supposed to understand them if you have no idea on what's going on? Just for example, just what you just described. Right now, if I make the parallelism with a company, if you build a data lake, let's say, you can have a lot of information gathered around, and you have servers, and you can have not infinite amount of data, but you can have a lot of data analyzed if you build the proper data architecture. On health, even though it's different variants, I do believe that it's also a matter of calculation. It's a matter of being able to do the linear regression or whatever statistic vehicle you need to prove hypothesis. How is quantum computing going to change this? Is this something that once we hit that, it's going to be as simple as just switch a button, and now everybody has personalized everything, personalized information? Like right now, what you just eat, this is the percentage of change. Let's begin with the basic. What is quantum computing?
Yeah, that's a giant leap there. So quantum computing is a new paradigm of computing. It's existed actually for the last 30 years on a very theoretical level. But now it's found like a lot of mainstream media attention, where we're coming up with the first quantum computers. We have a few hundred qubits that exist. It's very different to the way you do classical computing. So in your computer, there's a chip. That chip has transistors, and these transistors have essentially the ability to flip between 0 and 1, which are your bits. Now, transistors are becoming smaller and smaller. And when they get to a certain point, they already have, by the way, you reach the domain of quantum mechanics. They no longer function the way they should function. So for a long time, people thought, okay, when we hit this limit, the progress in computing will be over, because we can't make a transistor smaller, so we cannot pack more transistors in a chip. So there should be some limit. But that's when a few physicists came up with the idea of quantum computing. It is what if we use some of these quantum properties to our advantage? For example, you have Schrodinger's cat, which exists in a state of being alive or dead. It can exist in both.
The Schrodinger principle.
Yeah, the famous cat that can be both alive and dead at the same time. Your bits can also be in that position. They can be in both the state 1 and 0 at the same time. And then suddenly you don't have a classical 0, 1 bit anymore. You have a qubit that can exist in infinitely many states. And you can use that to exponentially scale up your computing speeds. Your AI models, you could have the ability to make them exponentially faster, not a factor of 2, not a factor of 3, but exponentially faster. And so problems that were thought unbreakable, like cryptography, you can suddenly break them because there are some quantum laws that allow you to bypass the classical cryptography experiments. But at the same time, quantum computers are not easy to build. They need to be very cold. You need very strong lasers. You need high fidelity qubits. In a classical computer, you have the liberty to clone your information. I can have 10 bits that all look the same. I can copy the state of one 10 times. In quantum computing, you have a theorem that says you cannot copy information. So suddenly it becomes very difficult to handle things like errors, to do normal classical operations that we think is very easy. So we need to solve this problem first. We're at a stage where we don't know what a quantum compiler would look like. We don't know what the best quantum architecture is. We don't know if we should do supercomputing or ion traps or NMR. There are many implementations. Which one do we pick? And is it application specific? We don't know any of that, but there's a huge promise and a huge potential that guides us in this direction, where we say, if we crack this problem, things will suddenly become faster. Our AI models will become faster. We can deliver insights to people like this, as you say. But in my opinion, that's maybe 20 years away.
And let's talk about the short term. What are your dreams around Allos? What is Allos going to solve in the next 5 years?
So at Allos, we do AI a bit differently. We do causal AI, which is not just extrapolating correlations and fitting a function, but trying to identify the cause and effect relationships between patient variables. So a very simple example that I can give you is, let's say you're planning a picnic and you decide, it may rain when I come back, so I'm going to take an umbrella. The way you made the decision is you planned when you want to leave for your picnic. You looked at the weather forecast, probably looked at whether you have an umbrella or not. And there were a host of factors that you considered before making this plan. This is cause and effect right there. You have traced out cause and effect before making this decision. A machine learning model, on the other hand, would say, Guillermo, give me the list of all the past 100 picnics you went on, and tell me the weather on all those 100 days and the weather in between, so that I can predict whether today it's going to rain and whether it's worth taking an umbrella. You don't make decisions like that. Nobody on earth makes decisions like that. But machine learning models and deep learning models make decisions like this. In healthcare, this is especially dangerous because you need to make decisions based on understanding cause and effect. Without understanding cause and effect, you're prone to make wrong decisions, like vaccines cause cancer, or asthma protects you from COVID. You can get all sorts of stupid conclusions when you just do correlations. But at Allos, we bring causality into the picture, which allows us to give you insights and tell you the causality behind those insights. And then you as a researcher or a doctor can decide whether you want to trust that and whether you want to take that action forward and what consequence that action is likely to have on the patient. So it's a lot more explainable, it's a lot more transparent, and it's structured in a way that human beings can understand.
That's impressive. And I think that's crystal clear. Like, that example is one of the best examples I've heard, because that's true. When we make a decision, you normally don't consider all the past situations when you have this decision at hand. You normally make a decision based on the current environment, on the current constraints, and all that you have around yourself right now. The past, how to say, the behavior of the past doesn't guarantee a behavior in the future. And it may be useful. No, it gets you statistics on trends, but that's not necessarily the best way of making a decision for this particular event. So I never thought of that as a patient. That's a new angle, and that's true. Our health, that's why a doctor checks you right now, right? They don't just ask you a survey and say, okay, if he answered X, Y, and Z, then he probably has this. He has to check your vitals. He has to read you right now. He has to see what had been happening in your life the past months or the past week. That's impressive, and I like that.
And more like, to take this further, to take your point further, a doctor doesn't say, oh, I measured Guillermo 5 times, so the 6th time he comes to the hospital, I'm just gonna like make a prediction based on the last 5 measurements. No, they still take your measurement the 6th time, and they tell you like, okay, I observed some trends, and now those trends are respected or they're not respected the 6th time around. That's how decisions are made.
And that's vital, like if I begin predicting your blood pressure, maybe I predict it's going okay and it's on a spike, and because I failed to check it, this person has a huge problem, right?
Well, for me, Guillermo, it would definitely be a spike on me. If somebody told me an AI model is predicting my blood pressure and it's stable, at that moment, I will have a spike, because this would not be something that I'd be comfortable with.
You're like, no, please, no. Maybe my digital twin, but not my real self.
Indeed.
Um,
Yeah.
I like that. And just to finish this talk, and I appreciate a lot your time. Um, you're one of the most brilliant minds I have the pleasure to meet, and obviously
Thank
bringing
you.
this gap between physics and life sciences, even though everything is science on that area, and I do see the way you see things. It's great that we're beginning to bring a healthier and more vast mix of talent into health problems, because we don't need these are things that are, even though they're supposed to be universal, they're not necessarily universal. And once we talk, and just to finish this interview, the first time I heard about Allos, I totally saw the value, because there's so many things that can be disrupted right now. Like even the
Mm.
medicine, right? Like as people age, once I was able to take a pill, maybe today I can't, and I need a
Mhm.
patch, or I need,
Mhm.
like just even those small things, just changing the vehicle of the medicine. For my kids, it can be a syrup, right? Instead of having a syringe and pinch them. There are so many things that we still need to develop, and
Yeah.
resources are always scarce. That's the truth. So if you don't have data driven decisions, you're allocating your resources on things that are good bets, but you're not sure that they're bets worth playing, and you're the
Exactly.
risking those bets. You pretty much are telling me this is still a casino, right? But at
Yeah.
least figure out that this is a roulette, and you're gonna win once every X times, because there are X amount of numbers. That's more useful, because now you can compare games, right? You can compare if you're playing craps or you're playing roulette, or at least you have that in consideration, because everything is new and there's so many things that you can explore. So thanks a lot for your time, and any call to action you want to throw to the people that are watching this.
Well, I think everybody who's watching this is probably interested in healthcare. So um, let's put our heads together and build a better future for everyone, because this is the way we get started. Better health is better life, and better life means we can allocate our time to make a better technology and better decisions overall.
And where can we find you? Is there, do you have Twitter? Do you have X? How can we follow
Yeah, you
Dr.
can
Aditya?
find me on Twitter. I'm Varna Iyer, which is my surname on Twitter, and you can find me on LinkedIn, where I'm just Aditya Varna Iyer. Yeah.
Great. So, Aditya, this has been my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having this time. It's been a great conversation. I love having the hands of our future with brilliant people like yourself, and
Thank you very
having the
much for the
best people.
invitation. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Have a
Take
great
care.
day, everyone. Bye.